Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first video in the BGSU's Lunch and Learn Git series. This is the first of 3 videos, and in this video I'll be talking about some of the basics of Git. So the first thing you're going to want to know is how to install it. If we go to this website, git-scm, you can get the downloads for Windows, such as, since I'm on a Windows computer, it pops up automatically, or you can download the Mac files as well. If you are running a Linux machine, you can go ahead and just do apt-get or yum install git, and it'll be right there in your terminal. Now, throughout this video and throughout this whole lecture series, I'm going to be using Git terminal or Git bash. There are some GUI tools. It's better if you learn everything through the terminal first, so that way you get a real good understanding of what is actually happening. So let's go ahead and pull up Git bash. So if you're unfamiliar with a terminal environment, just do your best to keep along, and we will actually be creating another Lunch and Learn series about running a Linux terminal. So for now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a directory, and I'm going to initialize a Git repository. So what a repository is it's just what stores your information, because Git is a version control tool. What that means is that it allows you to keep track of different versions of your files in really powerful ways, which we'll really dive deep into in this lecture. But a repository is simply where it stores all the information about the different versions. So we're going to use the command git init to initialize our repository. Now, all Git commands are prefaced with this keyword of Git. So now it says that we initialized an empty branch in this path. So now we're going to do this command called git status. And this shows us the status of our Git repository. So we can see we're on the master branch, and we'll dive into branches in a later lecture. Master is just the default name. We have this description here saying initial commit, which means that we have not added anything to our repository yet, as also shown by nothing to commit. So let's go ahead and make a file. So now we see that we have this file present. Let's go ahead and check our status again. Now we see that we have a lot of the same stuff. We have this untracked files thing right here, and it's showing the new file that we created. So what Git does when it tracks and untracks files is that it allows us to choose which files we want to keep different versions of. Say, for example, you're writing some C++ code, and you want to create an object file. You don't necessarily want those intermediate files to be stored. You simply want the source code to be stored, not the executable, not the intermediate, all this different stuff. So you can choose not to track that. So you have to tell Git to explicitly add a file, which, as it says right here, use git add and then the name of the file. Let's go ahead and follow that command. Do git status one more time. And we'll see that we have these changes to be committed, which means that we have a new file added to our repository, and it's this empty file that I made. I want to take a moment to point out what we have right here. This whole little section right here. Git is really good about helping you along. It likes to provide some really helpful suggestions. It tries to take a guess at what you want to do. So if you're ever lost and you just want to use some of these basic commands, Git might give you a pretty good idea of what to do. So now we have this added to the staging area. We haven't actually committed it to the repository. To do that, we need to use this command, git commit, and this nice little -m, which means that we're just going to add our message here. So in double quotes, we'll go ahead and type our message. We added our first file. Go ahead and get enter, and you'll see that it successfully added our file. So I said staging area, and there's a good chance you guys don't know what that means. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up this nice diagram. So what Git does is we have this working directory, we have this staging area, and then we have the actual Git repository. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Git doesn't automatically track files. It also doesn't automatically group things together. You have to explicitly add files when either you have a new file or you make changes. So let's say you're working on about 4 or 5 files at a time, but only 2 of them make sense to go together. Again, thinking of C++, let's say you're changing a header file and the implementation file for a class. Those 2 make logical sense to go together. So you can add just those 2 files from the working directory to the staging area. You can then bundle them together in one commit using the git command we saw earlier and putting it into the repository. You can add as many files as you want to the staging area. You can also remove files from the staging area. However, once things are in the Git repository, it's really hard to remove them from their final repository destination. So let's go ahead and go back to Git Bash. I just want to point out here what I highlighted earlier is how to actually remove a file from the staging area if you change your mind or if you accidentally add the wrong file. It gives you a nice little hint right here. So now let's go ahead and do status one more time now that we've added a file and committed it. So you see that we have nothing to commit. Our working directory is clean. Now our working directory is where we're actually making these changes. So that means that we have no changes that have not been added to the Git repository. And if you look, we no longer have this initial commit. That's because we've made a commit into our repository already. But let's say that it's been a while since you've worked on your project, or you have somebody else's project up. How are you going to know what commits have been made? You use this command Git Log. Git Log will show you the commits that you have already made. Now, I will say, and you only have to do this once, that you have to explicitly put your name and your email and things like that into your Git profile, but it will prompt you to do that the first time around. From then on, it's pretty much set unless you want to change it later on. So commit is made up of several elements. You have this commit ID, which comes into a lot of play later on in a future video. You have the name of the author, the email address of the author. Note for future watchers, this email is no longer valid. That is quite outdated. I haven't updated it on this computer yet. You also have the date, the time zone, the year, and then that message that we added up here. All of that goes into the Git log. So let's go ahead and make some changes to our file. You are welcome to use your favorite text editor to do this. I prefer Vim. Now earlier I made an empty file, so let's go ahead and just add a message. Now I made some changes. So let's check the status. So we have another variation of the status message. We are still on the master branch, but it says that we have some changes that are not staged for commit. Now if you think back to our diagram here, that means we have some changes in the working directory that have not made it into the repository yet. So we'll need to add those files to put them in the staging area and then commit those files to the repository. And it tells you what file you have made some changes to, and if you've done multiple files, it'll list them all here. And it tells you that it's been modified. Earlier on we saw that it said new file, but this one is just modified. So let's go ahead, add it to the staging area, and let's go ahead and commit the file with a nice good message of add some text to our file. Now you'll see there's some little verbiage in there. That's just because I'm running on a Windows computer using a bash shell. If you don't know what the difference between CLRF or CRLF and LF is, that's totally fine. That's not really important for here. So let's go ahead, check our status. We see that our working directory is clean. Let's check our log again. And now we have different commit message. We have a different entry. So I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to look at this file. So we see that we have our one line present. Well, let's say that we wanted to go back to an earlier version of the file. Now for me right now, in just this example, it means going back to an empty file, but it's just to illustrate the point. You can change between different versions of your files in Git with one simple command, and that's git checkout. Think of it as like you're going to a grocery store and I want to buy this box of cereal, or you're going to the movie store and you're like, I want to rent this video. You pick out which one you want and you just take it out to the cashier and you ring it out. You can check out different versions of your files in a very similar manner, and you do that using this big long commit ID. You check things out. You can either use the whole commit ID or the first 6 digits usually suffices. So I'm going to git check out this commit ID, and you'll see this lovely message here. There's nothing really too pertinent in there right now. You can read through it if you like, but I'm not going to take the time to delve into that now. So let's go ahead and look at the file now. Notice we have no output. We went back to the empty version of the file that I created initially. That's pretty nice. So let's say that you're working on a project and you wrote some code and it was great, and then you found a bug. And you changed a lot of things trying to fix that bug, and you ended up breaking your code. I had this happen to me, and this was before I used Git or any form of version control. That incident is what inspired me to start using version control, because I had to restart a month-long progress on a project. That was not fun. So using Git is great. So you can go back to different forms of your code or of any project that you're working on. But let's say, all right, this is fine. I want to go back to the latest version. Oh no, our log does not have the latest version because we went back to our point in time that these files were written, or last modified, or created, whichever portion of the commit log that you went into. So I only have this commit message. Luckily, Git has the special pointer, which is your branch. So if you ever want to get back to the latest version, this latest commit in your branch, which I mentioned is something we'll go into more depth in a later video, you can simply check out the name of the branch, and you'll see that we moved this head pointer from the commit that we were on to the latest commit in our branch, in our Git log. So this is pretty much the base of Git. This shows you how to initialize a repository, to add a file, to check the status messages, whether it's staging or making a commit. You can also check out the log and how to get different versions of your code checked out. So in future videos, we'll be talking about branches, and we'll be talking about this tool called GitHub that goes hand in hand with Git. But that is all for this video. Thanks for watching.